Oh boy. So I watched it. I watched the thing. I watched HBO's Dune Prophecy. Just a couple weeks ago, I made a video going over the 10 best TV shows of 2024, and this video was quite surprising for me when making it because most of the shows I was convinced were going to make this list didn't even make it to the honorable mentions. And if there is one show I was 100% certain would make the top 10, and didn't, it was Dune Prophecy. Out of every show that came out in 2024, there isn't a single one I was more excited for than Dune Prophecy. I might even go as far as to say Dune Prophecy is one of the shows I've been the most excited for in my entire life. I am a huge fan of Dune. I'm kind of obsessed with it, actually. I love the books, I love the lore, I love the characters, the themes, everything. Dune is without the shadow of a doubt one of my favorite pieces of media ever created. I love it with a passion. So you can only imagine, especially in the year where Dune Part 2 came out and became an instant classic, that the excitement I had for a Dune series made by HBO was through the freaking roof. I was shaking in excitement. I couldn't wait for this thing to come out. That's the only thing I could think about all year. I just wanted this show so damn bad. I was ready for it. And I was convinced this was going to be the next big thing, the next show that puts everybody on the same wavelength, the show that everybody talks about, the new obsession that dominates pop culture. Everything was in place for Dune Prophecy to be the new mastodon of television, a colossus we obsess with collectively week after week after week. And it's crazy because apparently, in terms of audience numbers, like ratings and such, Dune Prophecy was incredibly successful. It did really well. Like, they renewed it for a second season almost immediately. A lot of people watched this show. And yet, crickets. Nobody talked about it. In terms of discourse, it's been kind of a desert, no pun intended. Like, as someone who is chronically online, the social media presence of a show with that high of a viewership and based on such a legendary IP that just had an adaptation that is already considered to be one of the greatest sci-fi cinematic experiences of all time, it was surprisingly non-existent. This show kind of unexpectedly fell flat and didn't really poke people's interest more than that. And that is absolutely crazy to me. And when I look online to see reviews or to see what the few people that talked about it have to say about it, it seems like the general consensus around the show was a resounding meh. And that's kind of it. Like, overall, Dune Prophecy was received with a bit of a shrug, despite the fact that it was one of the 2024 series with the biggest amount of hype. So, what happened? What went wrong here? How did a show with so much promise and so much hype manage to leave people feeling so indifferent? Well, there's a very simple answer to that. It's because it's not that great. There, end of video. See you next month. No, but really, jokes aside, I think Dune Prophecy is a very unfortunate example of how capitalizing too much on an IP's hype can severely backfire if you can't back it up with actual good shit. And we're going to explore why that is in this video. This show made some mistakes that I think put some nails in the coffin before it even came out. And that all has to do with Dune as an entity. We're gonna get into all of that, but first, let's take a quick moment to thank today's sponsor, Raycon. I don't even need to tell you who they are. Raycon does not need an introduction. You already know they're the best everyday earbuds in the game. Everybody knows that, even your grandma. But despite being the best in the game, they keep improving. And even more now because their new sick models with active ergonomic design include some pretty sweet new features. Like its active noise cancellation, which is just perfect for traveling. We all know what it's like on an airplane or a busy train. And of course, they've got the amazing active noise cancellation that makes using them while traveling as smooth as butter, my guy. They also have a quick charge feature, a generally top-notch sound quality. Like I said, top of the game. Personally, as a person with really small ears, these are the most comfortable earbuds I've ever had. They're kind of a godsend, honestly. They're comfy, they're convenient, and they stay in place thanks to their different sized gel tips that allow you to find the perfect fit for your ears. I can go on a run with them or lie down however I want. These bad boys stay in and they're always comfy. So they're easily my go-to choice every single day. And you know what, guys? This is your lucky day because the homies over at Raycon are hooking you up. Right now, go to buyraycon.com/Space Ninja to get 20% off site-wide. This is not a joke. This is not a drill. That's right. You will get 20% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/Space Ninja. So don't miss your chance. This is it. And as always, thank you so much to Raycon for sponsoring this video. You guys are the best. And let's get back to the show. So, Dune Prophecy takes place about 10,000 years before the ascension of Paul Atreides. It tells the story of Valia Harkonnen, the leader of the Bene Gesserit. I mean, at this point in the timeline, they're not called the Bene Gesserit yet, they're just known as the Sisterhood, but it's the Bene Gesserit. Valia is a powerful woman, an extremely skilled individual, and an absolute political menace. She is carrying the great purpose of the Sisterhood ruthlessly as the Mother Superior, and she answers directly to the Emperor himself. But Valia's perfect plans are suddenly threatened as everything takes a turn when a dangerous conspiracy inside of the Imperium is uncovered. A mysterious man named Desmond Hart seemingly returns from the dead after a fatal incident on the planet Arrakis, and he returns with an asset that might be tied to the most dangerous threat humankind has ever faced. A threat they believe to have been defeated and eradicated generations ago. Okay, let's quickly explain something. Currently, at the time of making this video, there are about 30 novels in the Dune book series. Out of those 30 novels, only 6 were written by the original author, Frank Herbert. Those 6 books are the original 6 books in the series released between 1965 and 1985. That's Dune, Dune Messiah, Children of Dune, God Emperor of Dune, Heretics of Dune, and Chapter House Dune. That's 6 novels in 20 years. All of the other novels in this series were made after Frank Herbert's passing and were written by his son, Brian Herbert, and another author called Kevin Anderson. Now, I tried to read some of those later novels, but I don't think I finished any of them, so I consider that I've only read the first 6, and I personally consider, like many other Dune fanatics out there, that the Brian and Anderson novels are not canon. They negate a lot of things and ideas established by Frank Herbert, and they do things with the deep lore that I find kinda lame. Now, famously, Frank Herbert had initially envisioned 7 books for the Dune series, but he unfortunately passed away before he got a chance to make that 7th book happen, so the main original Dune series is unfinished, and it notoriously ends on a very weird, game-changing cliffhanger that has remained unresolved since book 6 was published 40 years ago. Okay, why am I saying all this? Well, it's to give a bit more context about where this show originated from. Dune Prophecy is adapted from a novel called Sisterhood of Dune, published in 2012, that was not written by Frank Herbert. This book is the first of a trilogy called Great Schools of Dune, and to be perfectly clear, when I say the show is adapted from the book, that term is admittedly a bit of a stretch. It's not really an adaptation. The show takes inspiration from the concept of the book and some of its characters to create a new story that is completely detached from it and that is almost entirely original to the show. And that's where the issues start for me. The Great Schools of Dune trilogy on its own was not particularly well received at the time it came out, And my personal issue with it is that some bad lore ideas that negate the original series make up a big part of the show's story. Alright, I'm about to dump some Dune lore on you, so listen the fuck up for a second. So, some 10,000 years before Paul Atreides, the universe was plagued by a historic intergalactic event known as the Butlerian Jihad, a religious crusade where humanity went to war with artificial intelligence, or as they're referred to in the Dune universe, thinking machines. Basically, humans created AI and let it evolve for thousands of years, to the point where it became way too advanced and where humans became too dependent on them to function. As a result of this, some ill-intentioned people began to use thinking machines to enslave other humans, and it caused a violent uprising where humanity realized how dangerous it was to let machines think for them, which in turn led to a gigantic war that caused the eradication of thinking machines and a new universal law that forbids their creation. That is why, in Dune, even though it is taking place tens of thousands of years in the future, you never see any robots walking around, no AI running spaceships, no self-run technology, no computers. Technology in this future is extremely advanced, but always directly operated by people. Now, in the books written by Frank Herbert, the take is that humans started to use thinking machines to enslave other humans. However, in the books written by Brian Herbert and Kevin Anderson, that lore is somewhat retconned to make it something much stupider. Instead of humans using overly powerful technology to cause harm, in this version, thinking machines become too advanced and begin to rule humans with an iron fist and enslaving them on their own. And they have a big machine overlord called Omnius that has evil mustache-twirling plans to decimate and enslave humanity in a big machine uprising. It's Skynet. It's a bad ripoff of Skynet. And unfortunately, this is the lore that the show chooses to follow. And that's important because thinking machines have a very big part to play in the story of Dune Prophecy. But it's based on bad lore. Keep that in mind. Alright, so now before I can talk more about the show and its story, we first need to establish more tangible context around the Bene Gesserit. Who are the Bene Gesserit? The Bene Gesserit is a mysterious sisterhood that has existed for thousands of years, an ancient order with enigmatic motivations and goals. They're not quite a secret society, because people know they're there, and they actively participate in the development of the Imperium, but while they have been around for millennia, people still don't know much of anything about the Bene Gesserit. They are a complete mystery to the universe. Nobody really understands where they came from, nobody really understands their practices. Most people just think they're a creepy cult of weird women, but they have power and value. So the Emperor and other political figures of the universe keep the Bene Gesserit close. They have them serve their interests and exploit their abilities to further their own agendas and to keep them under control as political pawns who are loyal to them. So, on the surface, the Bene Gesserit are a cult of galactic witches, sort of, that assist and serve the great houses of the Imperium to ensure its prosperity and the will of the Emperor. But in reality, below the surface, the Bene Gesserit are secretly running the universe. They are the real Emperor. They shaped most of what civilization is like. They're the ones in control, they just give everyone else the illusion of control. They use their influence on the great houses to infiltrate and manipulate the politics of the Imperium from the shadows, by slowly and carefully steering leaders in calculated directions throughout entire generations. They orchestrate wars, they carry out assassinations, they control bloodlines and influence their trajectories by carefully curating an order of birth through their ability to control their own molecular properties. That gets a bit weirder in the lore, but simply put, the Bene Gesserit are trained to have an almost divine control of their bodies, which allows them to develop superhuman abilities that almost feel like witchcraft. They notably have the power of the voice, which allows them to compel a person to do anything they say for a short moment, rendering them completely unable to control their actions.
You dismissed my mother in her own house.
Come here, kneel.
Then take out your blade!
it into your throat.
They also have remarkable perception skills, which allows them to read people almost perfectly. In other words, the Bene Gesserit are basically human lie detectors. They can sense when someone is not being truthful, which makes them incredibly valuable to the Imperium. Many members of the Sisterhood serve authority figures as truth-sayers who conduct interrogations with their designated elite to find the truth. But most of all, highly trained Bene Gesserit become so good at manipulating their own biochemistry that they can not only decide when they get pregnant, but during the pregnancy, they can also change the gender of the baby at will. By doing that, they get to choose what kind of heir is born into a great family and can influence future marriages and secure them more power through strategic alliances. It's what they refer to as the breeding program, and it is all surgically meticulous planning that takes centuries, if not thousands of years, to come to fruition. The Bene Gesserit are also responsible for creating entire civilizations based around religion. Over thousands of years, they work to implant ideas and beliefs into the minds of communities, to the point where thousands of years later, they have become some of the biggest religions in the universe, followed blindly by entire planets. The Sisterhood spreads stories of messiahs and gods and ultimate salvation in order to control people through faith. For example, the Fremen from the planet Arrakis, who we meet in Dune, are for the most part incredibly devoted to their religion. They live by a religious code and are almost entirely defined by their beliefs. They fight to protect their planet from people who come to exploit it, but also to preserve the integrity of their culture as they wait for their messiah to come and bring them to paradise. They call that messiah the Lisan al-Gaib, the voice from the outer world, who they believe will save their people and bring water and greenery back to the harsh desert that is Arrakis, lead them to a better tomorrow. The Fremen's entire religion, their culture, their way of existing for thousands of years, all of it is based on a myth that was invented and carefully implanted by the Bene Gesserit tens of thousands of years ago. None of it is real. It is a fake prophecy created to control people when the time comes for it. You get the idea. The Bene Gesserit rule the universe. They are lethal. They are the masterminds behind almost everything that makes humanity what it is in this galactic empire. But they manipulate everything from the shadows. The reason why they do this is because the Bene Gesserit, which is first and foremost a religion, believe in something they call the Golden Path. See, some Bene Gesserit have visions of possible versions of the future, an infinity of paths that lead to various outcomes. The Sisterhood's ultimate goal is to steer the universe into one specific path that will lead them to the birth of their own messiah, who they refer to as the Kwisatz Haderach, a super being, a male born to a great house and a Bene Gesserit that would be simultaneously a mentat and inherit the powers and memories of all Reverend Mothers, which would allow him to unlock an ultimate ability to see all of time at once, all of the past and all possible versions of the future at the same time. A power that would bring him to become the ultimate leader of the human race across the universe. So essentially, the Bene Gesserit have been maneuvering to breed a god they can control. Now, there is way more to all this. There is way more to the Bene Gesserit, but we could be here for hours and we don't have time, but these are basically the cliff notes. Okay, now that everyone has an understanding of the lore, let's get back to the context of the show. Here's why Dune Prophecy doesn't work for me. The story of the show, in concept, is actually brilliant. A threat emerging from the shadows and possessing technology that humans no longer have access to, and only the Bene Gesserit can deal with it while preserving the politics of the Imperium. Absolutely insane. Genuinely, I think it's a genius idea for a show in the universe of Dune. Where it falters, though, is 100% in execution. Dune Prophecy is a good idea that was executed like shit. My first issue with Dune Prophecy is that This show is not trying to be Dune, it's trying to be Game of Thrones, and I have a problem with that. Now, yes, I know Game of Thrones, or the books it's adapted from, was partially inspired by Dune. The politics of Game of Thrones are largely inspired by Dune. A lot of people have speculated that book Jon Snow is basically medieval Paul Atreides. There is a shocking amount of similarities between these two stories. I know, but what I mean by that is not necessarily on a story scale, it's more on a Hollywood being obsessed with recreating the success of Game of Thrones scale. And that creates two major issues for me. One, Dune Prophecy is a show that is trying too hard to be accessible to a large public. And two, in wanting to reach the largest amount of people imaginable, the show sacrifices its most important asset: the storytelling. To make it as clear as possible, Dune Prophecy is a baffling dumbing down of Dune. Every concept, ideology, and piece of lore attached to Dune is stripped of its complexity to essentially give us Dune for dummies. It fundamentally detaches itself from everything that makes Dune so powerful in order to make a more easily digestible show for audiences, because we want the success of Game of Thrones, but what we end up with is a show that doesn't trust the audience to understand literally anything that's happening, and that by default kind of treats the audience like idiots. Like I said, there are very few shows in existence I have been more excited for than Dune Prophecy. I do not have the words to properly describe how excited I was for this thing, so you need to know that one, making this video really hurts me. I am not enjoying making this right now. And two, when I sat down to watch the first episode, you need to know I meant business. The hype was through the roof. I ordered food, I sat on my couch, and I pressed play. When the episode was done, I whipped out my phone and I posted a story on my Instagram because I felt like I had to confirm with people that I wasn't crazy. This is my actual, in real-time reaction to finishing that first episode. I just watched the first episode of Dune Prophecy. It's not just me, right? It's not just me. Please tell me it's not just me. Listen, the aesthetics, the show looks beautiful. The acting is good. The writing? The dialogue? And look, I know that matching up to Dune Part 1 or 2 is like an impossible task. And also, you know my rule. I have my rule. Never judge a show by its pilot. I will keep watching. However, this pilot had a lot of red flags. From the first few minutes, just hearing the opening narration and seeing the first couple of scenes, I immediately felt something was off with the show. And from what hundreds of you guys have communicated to me after I posted that story, I am far from being the only one who felt off about the show. Listen, there's something I've been talking about a lot on this channel recently, something that's been bothering me a lot in recent television, a very particular pet peeve of mine. And that pet peeve is when TV shows are entirely composed of hyper-literal dialogue that has for only function to tell the audience what is happening out loud at all times. The dialogue never has anything to do with the characters, their arcs, their beliefs, anything that makes them them. It has nothing to do with the themes of the story, unless it's to literally say out loud what the themes are. There's nothing of substance there. It is just an endless series of scenes where characters stand around and vomit exposition because the people making the show think the audience is stupid and are not going to understand unless they tell them everything out loud every 5 seconds. Well, I just described Dune Prophecy. Dune Prophecy thinks you're an idiot. There's this one scene that really annoyed me where these two bozos have sex and then sit around and just proceed to explain out loud literally everything Dune is about, but to a degree that gets kinda ridiculous. See, in the universe of Dune, no matter at what point in the tens of thousands of years it spans, the most important planet in the universe is Arrakis, because Arrakis is the only planet where you can find spice, the most important resource of the universe. Rich and powerful houses take care of spice harvest on Arrakis, and a big theme that is often showed in Dune through storytelling is that the most powerful house in the Imperium isn't the Emperor's, it's whatever house is in charge of Arrakis. Whoever controls spice controls the universe. It's a very fitting theme that serves as a metaphor for a number of things, notably the United States and the violent history behind oil in the Middle East and all the exploitation and conflict it created. That theme is always communicated through strong storylines that make the point clear through certain actions that shift the balance of power in the story. Now, this same theme is also present in Dune Prophecy. And how does the show address that theme in the story? Like this.
The palace is meaningless. The real power is whoever controls the desert planet.
Yeah. It addresses it by just telling you out loud the point of it, because you're too stupid to get it. So they go the lazy route. There's another scene where the young Bene Gesserit in training are given orders by Reverend Mothers, and the situation makes some of the young girls feel iffy. You see, the Sisterhood has this catchphrase that works as a mantra. They say, "Sisterhood above all." It's their way of acknowledging their dedication to their peers. In that specific scene, it's very interesting because the young girls are not really agreeing with what's going on, and they start to question the meaning of that phrase. It's almost like when they say sisterhood above all, they are reaffirming their loyalty to the sisterhood's agenda and not the actual sisters. It's introducing a theme of the sisterhood's duty trumping their loyalty to each other, and then
Sisterhood above all. Not sisters. They don't care about you. Not like they care about the Order as a whole.
oh, okay, never mind. I guess we just say that out loud too. I mean, it's just, we got it. You didn't need to say it, we got it. Every time the show introduces an idea, a core theme, a concept to explore, it's like the script immediately panics and is like, fuck, they're too dumb to get this. We have to spell it out for them. Let's have a character say it out loud so we make sure they don't miss it. But bro, we got it. We got it! Basically, the whole show is a very long series of lazy exposition dumps, and as insane as this is about to sound, I have the exact same issues with Dune Prophecy's tell don't show policy that I did with the Percy Jackson series. Yeah, I've made a very long video about that show to break down how that type of writing completely ruined a show with a colossal amount of potential. So you can go watch that if you want a more in-depth view of this writing flaw. But just know, Dune Prophecy is the exact same. And here's why that bothers me so much, beyond the standard of it just being a pet peeve of mine. Dune, as an entity, is a story that thrives in subtext. It's very complex, it's weird, it's out there, but it trusts the audience with all of its intricacies. It never feels the need to hold you by the hand and explain everything to you like you're a toddler with no reading comprehension skills or no sense of critical thinking. A lot of Dune's core themes are never explicitly discussed in the books. It is all up to the person experiencing the story to peel its layers off. That type of storytelling is a deliberate choice that promotes thoughtful writing, because then it becomes the responsibility of the writer to make those messages clear through the story and not through lazy dialogue and exposition. Dune is about a lot of things. Most people will tell you Dune is a warning against the dangers of blindly following charismatic leaders, which is probably its biggest endeavor as a story. But it's also about oppression, about religion, about greed, capitalism. It deconstructs the very concept of power and the the idea of love versus duty. There are so many themes attached to Dune, and most of those themes are explored through subtext. It's a story that requires you to read between the lines and to make up your own opinions about the things these people are doing, the choices they're making, and the reasons why they make those choices. It's very rare for Dune to point at someone and explicitly say, this person is right, this person is wrong. It's always up to the person experiencing the story to figure out for themselves where they stand on those issues. Most of the time, those reasons are not communicated to you, but you learn to understand these characters and their motivations, so you just get it. Why? Because the story gives you the elements and trusts you with them. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not delusional either. I love the Dune movies, absolutely obsessed with them, but for a number of reasons, mostly cinematic purposes and time constraints, the movies had to simplify certain aspects of the book. The Dune novels are really long, really complex, and really bizarre. It's a weird story, a weird world, and Frank Herbert writes in a very weird way. And for the longest time, a lot of people believed Dune, as influential as it is as a piece of literature, was simply unadaptable. And yet, Denis Villeneuve pulled it off, but he had to make sacrifices. He had to make hard choices to adapt that story. And to this day, I fundamentally believe that these movies work because despite all of the changes it had to make from the book, those changes were made by someone who fundamentally understands Dune. Denis Villeneuve understood where to cut corners, where to make concessions to shape the story into cohesive movies without compromising the integrity of the lore and its themes. He never compromises the story's trust in the audience. He simplifies aspects of the book, but he never dumbs it down. He makes the choice to communicate certain things in a clearer way, but he never condescends the audience. He knows that preserving this complexity is what makes this story special. And through all the changes, whether it be removing the whole part about Paul being a Mentat to focus on the Bene Gesserit, or the entire transformation of Chani, who has a completely different story in the movies, all the changes around Lady Jessica and her pregnancy, all of it retains the core themes of Dune and lets them exist while fully trusting the audience to make sense of it. Dune Prophecy is the opposite of that. While this show is visually an impressive rendition of the universe of Dune, like seriously, the show looks amazing, it's crazy. Story-wise, this is a show that fundamentally misunderstands the point of Dune and fundamentally misunderstands the ways that story was purposefully presented. Dune Prophecy was created by Alison Shapker, who is also the showrunner. Alison has a pretty solid resume. She was a writer and producer on Alias, a writer and producer on Charm. She also worked on Lost, on Fringe, on Scandal, on The Flash. She was the showrunner of the series Altered Carbon on Netflix, and she was an executive producer and writer on the final season of Westworld. Like, bro, she's been out there, okay? This woman has worked on some stuff, and given the project she has gravitated towards in recent years, it makes sense that she was picked for something like Dune. Now, the thing is, initially, Dune Prophecy was announced back in 2019, and it was announced as Dune: The Sisterhood. And the big point of note from this earlier announcement was that the show was going to be produced by Denis Villeneuve himself, and he was also set to direct its first episode. John Spites, who co-wrote Dune Parts 1 and 2 with Denis Villeneuve, was tapped to write the scripts of the series. Dana Calvo, a writer and producer of the series Narcos, joined the project as showrunner. So basically, originally, Denis and John, the duo that were the architects of the masterpieces that were the Dune movies, and Dana Calvo, an extremely respected writer and producer behind one of the coolest shows to ever be on Netflix, were supposed to be making the show together, which was great news. That trinity was going to rock this shit. I was pumped. But Warner Brothers was reportedly unhappy with how the show was turning out, so they put themselves in the middle of it and things started to get messy, and things started to get delayed. They first decided to remove Jon Spites from the project because they didn't like his work on the show. Then, because of the delays that pushed the show back several years, Denis Villeneuve was forced to leave the project because he had to go make Dune Part 2, and it was impossible for him to focus on both things at the same time. So he couldn't produce and he couldn't direct the pilot. Dana Calvo also stepped down as showrunner and was replaced by one of the writers and producers of the originals, Diana Demoujon, but she also stepped down after production began, and that's when Alison Shapker came in and became showrunner. Okay. And to make matters worse, the director that was hired to replace Denis Villeneuve quit a few weeks into production, which caused even more delays. He was eventually replaced by Anna Forster, who is mostly known for having directed Underworld Blood Wars
In the night, I hear
and a couple episodes of Outlander. Long story, super fucking short, Dune Prophecy was a bit of a mess behind the scenes, with everything shifting around constantly and getting to the point where all of the people who made the fantastic Dune movies were being forced out of this project, only to be replaced by other filmmakers who didn't share a vision consistent with what the movies started. So, Dune Prophecy was made by the last-minute replacements of the previous last-minute replacements of the previous first replacements after the people who initially conceptualized the show as a companion piece to the movies were kicked out or had to leave. And while none of the people behind the final product seem like bad filmmakers, it's also important to point out that Dune Prophecy doesn't work because it was made by people who don't understand Dune. I think they understand what the lore is, but they don't understand how carefully that lore is presented. Presentation is everything in Dune. It is the main ingredient that makes this story so great. And you can tell they're missing the point from every choice that was made to tell the story of the show. This show takes Dune and robs it of all forms of complexity. It kills its clever presentation of conflicts, and again, it dumbs everything down to an insane degree. And because it strips the story and the concepts of any complexity or layers, the show has a really big problem that really messes it up from its first few minutes. Dune Prophecy is really boring. This show is kind of a snooze fest, and it's mostly because there is no real place for discovery here. There's no place for exploration. And not only does that make the story boring, it makes the characters boring. Valia Harkonnen is the main character of this show, and she's supposed to be this morally slanted leader of the Sisterhood whose real interests are a bit foggy. She's supposed to be mysterious and elusive, but I think the show completely fails at bringing this character to life. Why? Because the show feels the need to over-explain. Like, you don't get to discover Valia Harkonnen, because everything there is to know about her is exposited to you out loud in the first half of the pilot. You don't get the opportunity to uncover her, to get to know her, how she functions, the intricate ways she manipulates people, the way her pride of being a Harkonnen, who are looked down on by the Imperium, is in direct conflict with the very foundation and the values of the Sisterhood. The way that same pride makes her power hungry, and the fact that she may be using the Sisterhood to satisfy that hunger for power and control. You don't get to uncover any of this. You don't get to peel off the layers as the audience, because everything is just spelled out for you out loud as soon as the show begins. By the time episode 1 ends, you know absolutely everything there is to know about Valia, and it renders her character unbearably boring. She's so flat and uninteresting, despite the fact that the idea of the character is amazing. Again, fantastic concept, terrible execution. Emily Watson is incredible in the role, and Jessica Braden, who plays a young version of Valia in flashbacks, is even better. Emily Watson plays a more mature Valia, who has sort of mastered her craft. She's more stoic, more in control of herself, but Jessica Braden plays a young, untamed Valia, who above all else is extremely emotional. She's driven by anger and a desire for revenge for the injustice that the Harkonnens faced and for the death of her brother. She has trouble controlling her emotions and she scares people, and the Bene Gesserit doubt her when she arrives and trains with them. On the surface, it's a good idea, but in execution, it is really fucking boring. And if we want to talk about the dumbing down of concepts of Dune, look no further than the Emperor, played by Mark Strong. A character that annoyed me so fucking much and that, to me, fully represents everything wrong with this show. It's very common in the Dune universe to have a theme about how the person on the throne of the universe is actually quite powerless. It's a theme that is rampant in every different era of the story, and it's always treated with a lot of intelligence. But here, in favor of a very Hollywood message of fuck the patriarchy, they dumb this character down so fucking much that he essentially turns into a parody. He is cartoonishly clueless, like to the point where it's just a little cringe to watch. I get that the point they're trying to make is that the Emperor is dumb and that the Imperium would fall apart if it wasn't for the women around him pulling the strings. The entire show, the Emperor is a bumbling idiot who never knows what to do, and his wife and the sisterhood tell him what to do, but make it seem like it was his idea to protect his fragile masculinity. Sure, okay, cool message. I'm not against it being there, I'm just mad that it's presented that stupidly. Why are you dumbing this down so much? This isn't groundbreaking. This has been a theme attached to the Bene Gesserit from day one, but they do it in a way that's like subtle and like not stupid. You have so much incredible source material to take that theme and adapt it in a way that is actually meaningful and that doesn't treat the audience like morons. In Dune, in the Paul Atreides era, the Emperor is also kind of clueless and his power is an illusion. He's also controlled by the Bene Gesserit, but he's a more believable character. He's clueless, but he's not an incompetent, bumbling idiot right out of a sitcom. We're talking about fucking Dune here. Have a little respect for your audience's intelligence. Because yes, by the way, again, the show thinks you're stupid. So in the finale, there is a very long scene where Valia Harkonnen, the fucking mother superior of the Bene Gesserit, explains out loud every bit of power dynamics between her and the Emperor in a speech that is just so badly written and so embarrassingly on the nose and so unbelievably condescending to the audience. Just yet another display of the hyper-literal dialogue that doesn't trust you to understand what's happening, so they spell it all out for you.
The truth is, Emperor, you are a weak man. You've always needed someone else to hold the strings. You've simply traded one puppet master for another. We've been shaping your path since before you were born. Every decision you've ever made, we made it for you.
Oh my god, you gotta be fucking kidding me. You're just gonna explain all of it right there? Like it's a Disney Channel show? Is this what we're doing? Really? The woman emasculating the man in power? Hollywood girl boss content? That's what we're doing with Dune? The Bene Gesserit in the source material do not give a fuck about emasculating men and humiliating people by being like, ah ha ha, it was us all along. Bro, they're building a universe. They're building a god. They're covert as fuck. They're busy. They have shit to do. They don't have time for that. The story makes that theme clear for you, not the characters. What is the purpose of that scene? What is the point of Valia doing this? How does that further her agenda in any capacity?
We were the ones who made sure your father took the throne so that it would fall to you. We brought the unallied worlds under your banner. We sent you Francesca to keep your attention. You were only ever an assignment. One of many.
I don't believe you.
Your wife doesn't respect you. Your daughter's lost faith in you. Your Bashar is simply using you for his own ends. You didn't really think Francesca loved you, did you?
Bro, I'm gonna fall asleep. This is so lame. This is so regressive to the Bene Gesserit and everything they stand for. I fucking hate this. Bro, we know that Emperor Carino doesn't really have any power and only sits on the throne because other people allow it. You don't need to dumb it down this much just for the sake of a disingenuous girl power moment brought to you by Warner Brothers. Stop treating the audience like fucking morons. This is Dune, not a soap opera. Step your fucking game up, for God's sake. I cannot believe I am watching a Dune story with the dialogue level of a CW show. Dune has never been a stranger to commentary about the patriarchy. It's something that's present all throughout the books, but just not like this. Not in this contrived, condescending, mind-numbingly literal way. Step your fucking game up. And that's what annoys me so much with the dialogue dumbing everything down for the audience. I'm not talking about one scene here, I'm talking about the entire show. The main plot and all the shitty storylines with boring Bene Gesserit and the other subplot with the Atreides dude bro. And then after like episode 4, the show just gets kind of silly. So first of all, there's this character in the show called Desmond Hart. He's supposed to be a weirdo. He's a mysterious character, a devoted warrior who had something really strange happen to him on Arrakis. Basically, he was swallowed up by a sandworm, but then by some complete miracle, the sandworm spit him back out, and he returned with some newfound abilities that defy everything we know. On paper, that's an intriguing guy, intriguing character. Give me more. But just like the Emperor, Desmond Hart is accidentally really fucking silly. He's also like a cartoon character. He feels really out of place in this show, like he's a weird blend somewhere between Charlie Hunnam and Jack Sparrow. He's just weird, I don't like him. And that's before we get to the Rey Palpatine-ass twist of his identity that genuinely made me roll my eyes so hard I'm pretty sure the sun started orbiting me. The twist is that Desmond is out of nowhere revealed to be the secret lost son of Tula Harkonnen, Valia's sister, who had to give him up at birth. He is the first offspring of a Harkonnen and an Atreides, two houses who are mortal enemies, and his genome has a potential that could make him the Kwisatz Haderach, which is not really a thing that exists yet for the Bene Gesserit, whatever. That is such a convenient, stupid fucking twist. I could not believe what I was watching. Anyway, he has an eye that was probably given to him by Ixians, who briefly appear in the show. That eye is not organic, but mechanical, and it gives him the ability to spread a machine virus that attacks people's brains by feeding onto their fear. Yes, it turns out the legendary mantra, "Fear is the mind killer," comes from a literal virus that literally kills literal people by literally infecting their literal brains through literal fear. Way to go, guys! Let's just make everything about Dune as fucking literal as possible. Woo fucking who, dude? The series ends with a bunch of twists that really are not that surprising because, again, most of it has already been exposited in the pilot. A big surprise with the finale is that Valia is evil and manipulated everyone to become leader of the sisterhood. She went as far as killing other sisters who refused to follow her cause. She's evil. Yeah, we knew that already. Killing her peers and using the sisterhood to satisfy her own desire for power is literally the first thing we see her do in this show. There's never any reason for us to think otherwise. There's never a reason to make us doubt what her real intentions are or whatever. That's literally all they talk about with Valia for the first 4 episodes. We know. This isn't a surprise. This isn't impactful. And it's not like it's full of bad ideas. The fact that the end of the season comes down to the sisters and their difficult bond is really interesting. I was really into that idea. I think it's really fitting. But 1, dialogue sucks, so their confrontation is boring as hell, and 2, I think the show does a terrible job at fully exploring the 2 different dynamics Valia and Tula have, both as sisters by blood, but also as sisters through the sisterhood. Once again, an interesting idea, executed like shit. There is one really good scene where Tula is reunited with Desmond and there is a very long emotional shift, and that scene was amazing to me for a very simple reason. It's like the only scene of the show that is not ruined with hyper-literal dialogue. They go through an entire emotional journey together for over a minute without saying a single word, and so much is communicated in that silence. We are watching all the conflicting feelings of a son who was abandoned by his mother and a mother who sees the son she had to let go. But none of it is said out loud. That scene thrives in subtext. Would you believe that? And then the show ends with Valia arriving on Arrakis, beginning an alliance with the Harkonnen and Atreides and a Carino, which I'm guessing is gonna serve as like a big origin story for all of the status quo in Dune. Yay. See you in season 2, I guess. Look, I'm not gonna go in depth about the entire show and its story and its characters, because if I decide to go deep on Dune lore, this video would be 10 hours long. I really just needed to communicate that I felt a bit betrayed by this show. I really wanted to love it. I was certain this was gonna be in my top 10 shows of the year, and let me tell you, in my head, it wasn't gonna be number 10. I wish I had footage of the disappointment on my face after watching the first episode. I wish I could have showed you that. I was sitting on my couch in silence by myself at 2 in the morning, just completely discouraged, completely baffled and confused as to how the show could have ended up this way. I looked like a sad puppy because I swear I wanted this show to be a fucking home run. But guys, I gotta be honest here, as a gigantic Dune shill, they really missed the mark here. It's not an abomination of a show, like it didn't make the top 10 worst list either, but at the end of the day, Dune Prophecy is one of the biggest disappointments I've had with television in a really long time. It's a mediocre series with incredible visuals and a cast that is way too good for how little they have to work with. It's a show based on Dune that doesn't understand what makes Dune great, and overall, it just comes off as yet another attempt by HBO to get their next Game of Thrones. Is it the worst show ever? No. It's well acted for the most part. It's well directed. It is visually gorgeous. The music is good. Every issue I have with this show comes down to the writing. The dumbing down of every concept of Dune, the constant hand-holding, the bafflingly stupid dialogue. This show was entirely failed by its writers. The writing drags it down significantly. The show is uneven, needlessly convoluted, it's bloated, and unfortunately, it's very boring. The pacing is all over the place, the characters are for the most part painfully forgettable, and the story overall is a gigantic letdown. I was expecting so much out of this, especially considering that this came out on the same year as Dune Part 2. This should have been the biggest show of the year, but nope. A lot of people watched this show and nobody cared to talk about it. It completely failed to have the same impact as the movies, and that's a shame. Genuinely, if it wasn't part of my job to keep up with new television, I don't even think I would have noticed this show was out. That's how little noise it made. Anyways, the show was renewed for a second season pretty quickly because it did have solid ratings, and I will probably watch it because I'm obsessed with Dune and I have this misguided hope that it will get better. Not a lot of hope, because I'm probably being delusional, but still, some hope. But as of right now, yes, Dune for Dummies is the most disappointing show I've seen in years.
song.